Leadership is a weird thing. It's a weird feeling because, like, especially for me, like, I never went into anything being like, I want to be a leader. But it just naturally happens when you're somebody that's passionate. You're wanting to really manifest your own visions for the future. I think it just happens.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Coding Colored Glasses. I'm your host, Lynn, and today I'm here with Sierra Scott, an accomplished product leader and cybersecurity advocate based in Toronto. With a master's degree in IT and a mission to build an ethical and secure tech solution, Sierra has dedicated her career to bridging innovation with integrity. Known as the hashtag It Girl, she is passionate about creating impact-driven products and fostering inclusivity in tech. Whether it's championing data privacy or leading growth initiatives like the iHub app, Sierra is making her marks on the tech world. So Sierra, let's get right on into it with our first question. How did you get into cybersecurity?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks. I'm super excited that we get to have this chat today. I've seen your podcast. I've seen a lot of the things that people are saying, and it just seems like such a great initiative. I'm a fellow girl of color that codes, so I'm super excited by this. But so to get into your question, so how did I get into cybersecurity? Funny enough, I was first exposed to like digital protection and its importance when I was doing an internship in Indonesia. It was like about 6 years ago, and I was out with my friends. We were posting for people back home. We were sharing our location. We were actually at a restaurant, and somebody came up to us like after we had just posted, and they were like, "Hey, this is you," and they called each of us out by name and pulled up our profiles. Yeah, I was like, what? So like that really just like kind of spooked me, I guess, because I was like, okay, like obviously like you would think like, yeah, you post your location, people can obviously see where you're at, but you don't really think about who's around you and those people, right? So that kind of like reframed my mind around like the digital space is still you. Like who you are in the digital space is can be connected to you in your real life. So kind of connecting that back now, I've been an advocate of cybersecurity, and specifically, I've always been a long-term person of somebody that just wants to protect others. I've always started initiatives that really try to drive impact and social impact for people. So I feel like there's a real connection there with my passion for technology and innovation with protecting people, and that bridges for me in cybersecurity. So that's kind of how I got started. I decided to jump into my master's of IT, and as I was doing that, as I was again really learning about what is cybersecurity, what is the protection of others, I decided to specialize in it. So that's kind of how I got into it. And really, my hopes are with cybersecurity. I really want to be able to help digital leaders and products be really ethically sound from the ground up. Like what happens when you actually build with security in mind, as well as like how do we actually protect vulnerable groups? There's a lot of things going on in the digital tech space. There's things that are going on right now with Instagram. People are having to, Instagram is having to shut things down to protect underage users. So how do we actually create a space for people to be protected, to truly make sure that their mental health isn't being impacted, their financial security isn't being impacted? So for me, I think it touches a lot of things that I think have a lot of actual human impacts. So that's how I got involved in what I'm hoping to accomplish.
I love that. I love your answer. The fact that we're in Indonesian, just people can just find you. 2 episodes ago, I just talked about cyber health with Nicole Dove, who is the head of cybersecurity at Riot Games, and she was telling me all about how you need to have like a really good like cyber health not regime, but like practices in place for your own protection, for your own safety, and just being able to go to and know people who are in that space who are able to inform you. And you're right, it's not just about people who are directly near you or just around you. You also have to be thinking of what type of information am I putting out for other people who I don't know, who are going to see it, who are going to look at it. And it's all about presenting yourself in a way where you're going to be not only safe, but able to express yourself properly. So I know you mentioned like starting initiatives and hopes and things like that and what you hope to accomplish. So what inspired you to kind of start your blogs and podcasts?
Yeah, so honestly, I really just wanted to do something fun. You know, I IT specifically is a new it's new for me, but it's not. It's a place that I've dabbled in for a really long time. But I wanted to be able to have conversations with like-minded people, kind of find my tribe of people that are thinking ethically, thinking how do we actually create a world where we design things for the protection of others. So I really, what inspired me was just wanting to have those conversations, wanting to be a leader in that space and really facilitate what it really means to be a good product manager, a good innovation leader, and somebody just in the space. I want to highlight young voices. I want to highlight people that are underrepresented in the space that are driving impact and see a different future. So that's kind of why I started with the IT girl branding, really, but it's all just to facilitate those conversations.
Yeah, and I totally, obviously, as a fellow podcaster, I can totally resonate with that messaging of just like wanting to create a space where people feel comfortable to ask questions, share their story, to motivate other people, to inspire people. And one of the ways that I think people do this is obviously through leadership. And I think one of the more important things about leadership is a lot of times that it doesn't really matter where you come from. You can exhibit leadership in all types of different forms in all types of different capacities. So I just wanted to ask, like, what role do you think your background played in your current successes, especially with leadership and just leading the change to try to include more people in the cybersecurity space?
Yeah. Leadership is a weird thing. It's a weird feeling because, like, especially for me, like, I never went into anything being like, I want to be a leader. But it just naturally happens when you're somebody that's passionate. You're wanting to really manifest your own visions for the future. I think it just happens. When I first, I guess, started studying, I actually focused in on finance, which was a very like compliance heavy space. So I feel like that had a lot to do with my, I guess, where I'm at now in tech, because I'm used to kind of trying to understand that compliance. Tech is also very heavily compliant, but really, I think it just started from, like, again, wanting to help others. When I was in school, I always jumped into different clubs, different projects, really just to try to honestly do work. I don't know why, but I've always just wanted to do more work, and do the actual work to help other people. So I think my, like, where I'm at today, like, I feel like I was born for those like scrappy, small startup type of environments where I'm wearing multiple hats. I have to go and do a lot of things that I'm uncomfortable with. I think that has really built that foundation for me. So that's why I love jumping into new projects, new startups, and really just seeing what are the opportunities there. How can we grow from the ground up?
Oh, I think that is the first time I've ever heard somebody said that they wanted to do more work.
I know the goal in life is to do less, but
Yeah.
I don't know why. I'm just like, give it to me and I'll get it done.
Yeah, especially now with like our new incoming wave, we're all seeing like the shift towards like soft life and being very
Yes.
like down to earth and less work, less pressure on ourselves. And I think that it's just very just different and almost it's inspiring in a way because you are wanting to put yourself out there and really like see what these companies could do and really push yourself and be passionate about different initiatives. And I think that's very commendable because a lot of people like they cannot wear multiple hats, and it's so. And I don't blame them for it at all. Wearing multiple hats is hard work, but I think that when it comes to these types of like scrappy, really get your hands in the dirt type of startups, you really have to be passionate about what you're working on. And I think it just shows drive and initiative, which is obviously something that we need more of in the world. But in the ways of like being like having passion and having drives, what are some ways or some tech myths that you've kind of had to debunk to kind of stay motivated? Because you mentioned a little bit earlier that tech is very compliant, and we all know that tech is like very, you have to have rules that you're going to follow, because obviously if we don't have these type of rules in place, things will collapse and they won't be able to run smoothly. But what are some ways that you've broken down some tech myths to stay motivated throughout your journey?
Yeah. Thinking about this, like, there's a lot of like tech myths, but when I first started to tell people that, I'm really passionate about technology, I want to jump in and be a part of that innovation. And specifically, when I wanted to jump into my master's, I actually got a lot of pushback. A lot of people telling me, you don't need to have formal education to be successful in tech. You don't need to actually get technical skills to be successful in tech. And really, I was like, I even to the point where like I told some people about it, and they were really like, where is this ambition to do that coming from? They're like, why a master's? And I felt like I had to keep like justifying it and telling people why I wanted to dive in. And really, like, I don't think you necessarily need to like pursue your master's of IT if you want to be a technology leader. But I think what really happened once I jumped into formal education, it really started to change my mind, right? Like it started to change my mindset as a leader, because I was able to jump into situations and ask the right questions. I was able to really build a deep understanding of what is actually going on in the world around me. What are the things that my team is really working on? Like, what is the infrastructure that we've built? Like those things were kind of just like fluff to me before, but once I started to dive into the weeds of what it actually takes to build technology, build for security, like really build these things, I was like this is the best thing that happened to me. Like in 1 year, I learned IT project management. I learned how to code Python. Like I learned like how to actually build a database and what that actually looks like. So for me, I think one of the myths that I kind of had to overcome is that, saying that you don't have to jump into like studying and learning to be successful. I think, really tech is all about constantly keeping up, constantly keeping yourself educated, constantly being like, I'm going to pick up a new skill. I'm going to go practice something. I'm going to jump in and try a new Python project because somebody posted it and I'm interested in it, right? So I think it's constantly about keeping ourselves upskilled. So I think that was one of the biggest myths that I had to overcome and staying motivated is that, I want to do this and keep reflecting on the things that I'm learning, because I truly saw my whole leadership chemistry, my brain chemistry start to change once I actually dove into formal education.
Yeah. And coming from that, like, in an era where a lot of people are wanting to pursue these tech jobs, and we're seeing that people are increasingly moving towards like not getting formal education to pursue tech jobs. And of course, there's nothing wrong with that. Like learning and building these skills. If you have the skills and the talent to do a job, you should, go after it and learn the skills. If you don't have to drop, $20,000-$30,000 to
Oh
go to
yeah.
school to learn something, you should do it. But I think that it becomes more apparent where that formal education experience is needed when you're really focusing on something more niche, more kind of concentrated in like IT, and just, having that background of like understanding, okay, how do I make this company a safer place, or how do I make this, this website safer, or how do I have these, these contacts or these people, how do I, improve their quality of life by making everything around them safer and making it easier for those people to have peace of mind when they get home. And, you know, even though, non-traditional is still, a way to go, but formal education, I feel, in my opinion, I feel that when it comes to these more concentrated efforts, it really does take one to know one. So getting, that experience where you're really focusing and niching down, having someone who's like looking over you and being able to tell you, okay, this is what you're going to experience, and having just longevity and time that you've put into something, it really just shows passion, and it's showing drive, and it's really showing to people that this is what you're looking to accomplish, and this is what you know how to do because you sat down, you invested time, invested money into learning something. And I know a lot of, people like might have opinions about, well, you only need so many months of school. When you're really passionate about something, it almost becomes like a no-brainer. Why wouldn't I go get the master's degree? Why wouldn't I go get the PhD? This is what I love, or I'm passionate about. But you do mention navigating some non-traditional tech landscapes in your blog. So how do you go about like navigating those landscapes?
Yeah, for sure. Before I jump into that, I wanted to just touch on one of the things that you said. Like, yeah, like, again, with the formal education, like I think people think like, oh, I'll get a foundation and I'll jump into a job. But at the end of the day, like nobody's holding your hand when you get into that job. Nobody's like, hey, I'm going to teach you from the ground up about what it is that you need to do, right? Like you have to be an active person in your own understanding of kind of what do I not know, what do I not understand, and be hungry enough to go after those types of that knowledge, right? So I think you could spend as much time in a space with. I think the exposure helps, but definitely education starts to accelerate you a lot more, and you have to be able to keep up. So in my podcast, when I'm talking about non-traditional non-traditional spaces and how and technology's role in that, really, it's about the fact that no company today is operating, or at least most companies today are not like operating with some type of technology or some type of data piece set in within their business model, right? So when we talk about non-traditional tech spaces, so say you're somebody that works in a nonprofit, you might have to become your own IT team without ever even knowing it, right? You have all of these sets of tools that you're using. You have CRMs and websites and all of these things that are going on, and you have to interact with that every single day. So I think thinking about technology, I think even in non-traditional spaces, people have to have that tech acumen, that business acumen to really understand the world around them. Like if you're even like somebody that's building programming for children, right? Like you need to have an understanding of like, hey, if we're getting them to interact with an app, or we're having them sign up for something, or just you need to understand what that actually means, what those impacts are. You also need to have an understanding of the digital world that they're interacting with too, right? Even if you were a church leader, like, and collecting information, like you could have exposure to being ransomed, things like that. So I think when in today's world, like with everything going digital, like we also need to make sure, like if you're a nonprofit founder, like you need to make sure that your team is aware of what's going on. So really when it comes to those like non-traditional tech spaces, like we really need to make sure that everybody's brought up to a level where they can really understand the impacts of what they're doing, the data that they're collecting, because data in today's day is key to really understanding business and business impacts, and they're just becoming so intertwined. So I think everybody in some way is going to be touched by technology. So yeah, when I'm in my podcast, I'm kind of talking to people about how do you actually build a culture that understands the true impact of what technology and data can have. how that plays into any organization.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I don't think I was thinking about it in that way, but when you explain it like that, yes, it does make sense because who is not using technology in today's day and age? We're becoming increasingly digitized. It's becoming increasingly more apparent how easy it is to find somebody or, get information from people by simple videos that you can post, by simple things like photos, simple things like just writing and text, being able to identify people. I think it's actually one of my funny TikTok trends that I think is so hilarious is when people go to the profiles and they're like, I bet you can't find me off this profile. And they just go down a whole rabbit hole and they're just able to find them. And I'm like, what the heck?
All Loki did that.
Like, find their whole Facebook profile, their mom, their dad, their grandma. And it's just like, you can really see where it becomes necessary for you to become your own IT department, become your own cybersecurity task force. Like I talked about last week, and if you guys have not watched the cyber health episode, please make sure to go check it out right after this episode. But like I talked about last week, we talked a lot about just, increasing that cyber health, being able to know who your cybersecurity people are in your nonprofit. And even if in nonprofit we don't have a dedicated space or, dedicated team for those people, I think it's becoming, like you said, increasingly apparent that we are going to need these teams. I wanted to ask you, what are some big examples that you've heard about or seen in your podcast that really highlight the importance of, just having the acumen of having the skill to understand these type of problems like cybersecurity problems or data privacy problems?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a few examples that come to mind, but recently, I think, oh my gosh, I'm kind of blanking on the company's name, but there was a CEO that was arrested in Paris because they failed to put in, I think, child protection services within their platform. So really, I think what that showed is that negligence, no matter what level you are within an organization, you really people are going to be accountable for what they're doing when they're building these things. We don't live in a world anymore where you can just build something, let it go, and then whatever happens to the people that are using it, it's whatever, right? There is going to be serious consequences when it comes to how we deal with people's data. I think 23andMe actually, they just went bankrupt, I think at the end of October, and they have collected millions of people's bio data. So many people's bio data, and they're like, yeah, we're going bankrupt and nobody knows what's going to happen with this data yet, right? So there's so much going on, and I think really what it comes down to is the fact that there's going to be a change in accountability and the responsibility of everybody to not be negligent when it comes to data. So I think that those are a few examples of kind of those impacts.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That really shocked me.
And I've done 23andMe because
My
maybe we
goodness.
should go in and
Yeah.
delete it.
Oh my gosh. Thank goodness I have never used 23andMe. So all our viewers who are watching who have used 23andMe, I am so sorry. I did not know. Wow. That really shocked me. I think that really got me. But it does remind me of a case that just actually recently happened of an AI company. I think it was Character AI. I could be wrong. But it was one of the AI companies where you were able to interact with a chatbot, and the name says, Character AI. It's a chatbot based on the mannerisms and the speaking patterns of your favorite characters like Mickey Mouse and different anime characters and things of that nature. And just trigger warning really quickly. I'm about to mention suicide, but one of a younger user on the app, he was about 14, and he took his own life while after having a conversation with one of the chatbots. And I just at first I really at first I was really confused because I was almost like taken aback. I was like, okay, how did how did this happen? Because you started out talking to one of your favorite characters online, and then the conversation escalated in a way that you felt that you had to, take your own life. And at first I was really just confused. And after diving into the situation, listening to the testimonial of the mother, listening to other privacy experts and just experts on child safety in these type of AI and just data privacy spaces, they really explained and highlighted that the information that was gathered by the AI bot was what led to the chatbot being able to kind of not convince, but almost persuade in a way that made it seem like she was so real that in order for this young person to get to this character, he would have to take his own life so he could, be with her. And I think that it really highlights how when you don't take these when we don't take everyone into account, that we don't take everybody's perspective, everybody's opinion into account, and we don't think about all of the possible ways that it can go wrong, it can lead to big, just huge repercussions. And I think his story really highlights that. 23andMe's story really highlights that if we didn't take into account, like, where are we going to put this data? Because this is not, oh, I know where you live, which is a scary thing on its own. But we have your medical data, we have your family's data, the history of your data. And it's a really scary fact about technology, because on the surface, it seems just so like, well, what can go wrong? It's just tech. If you use it in a certain way, nothing will go wrong. But we have to really be careful, especially as, coders and tech enthusiasts, to really take into account everybody's perspective, to take into account all of the things that can go wrong. And you have to be your own cynic and just like understand, okay, what are the ways that this could go wrong? What are the ways that this can go wrong? And another story that's really relevant to this issue is a story about BetterHelp, and how I think a lot of the times people who are trying to solve a problem, they're so passionate about solving a problem. In their passion, they forget the experiences and the voices of other people, because they're so focused on solving a problem from their perspective, from their point of view. And I think that's really important. So,
Yeah, I think it's super powerful what you just said. Like, we really don't think about, again, like when we're building something, you could think, oh, maybe this will just touch a few people, but what if a million people end up liking your idea and jumping into it? Like the suicide case is very extreme, but it is a reality, right? These tools, these apps that are coming out, the influence and power that they have over the mind, and the effects of these algorithms specifically on social media is so crazy to me. Like, we are so influenced by our phones, by this digital space that we've created. Like, some people spend hours and hours in these platforms, and it truly does start to change your brain chemistry, right? Like, what you put into it is what you start to get out of it. Like, if you are somebody that's negative, on the verge of doing something like that, maybe you're gaining messages that almost enable you to do these
mhm.
things, right? Because you're kind of feeding it, and as you consume it, just it gives you more and more. We definitely need to be aware. That also brings me to it, like, a thought too, like this specifically happened with TikTok in Canada. um TikTok was just banned in Canada. Not the actual app. You can still use the app, but they closed down all of their Canadian operations. So they had an office in Toronto and an office in Vancouver, and they were like, you guys pose a national security risk. They have data that shows that these apps can be used to influence politics. They can be used to influence the minds of young people, right? So not only that, but they're also collecting tons of data outside of the app that you're even using, right? So there's so many things that you have to think about. And I think you said it, like, not just from your perspective or from the perspective of solving a small problem, because the big thing in tech is you're trying to solve one problem, but it pivots, it moves, and you kind of have to go where the market tells you to go. So if your product is built for one thing, it could, be manipulated for all of these other uses, and you really have to think carefully about the impacts. And like, that's why I think, like, ethical thought processes from the beginning are really intentionally trying to build out, like, how do we actually build this with our own ethics and values in mind, and how do we kind of be like good parents of the technology that we're building, and teach it the morals that we want it to portray in the world.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what you said, like just teaching the technology to do what we want it to do, because a lot of times I think that we don't really think of data as like a tool of can be such a powerful tool, but it's one of the more like insidious ways to, harm people. Because at first when we think data, we're thinking like, okay, like the app knows what I want to buy for Christmas. Okay, that's one thing, but it's not just knowing what you want to buy for Christmas. It's like influencing you to buy certain things that you don't need, to feel a certain way about yourself, to feel a certain way about a certain group of people, to spread misinformation, even at the detriment of hundreds of thousands of people. And we can see that a lot in social media apps that we have today. And I think that these situations, when we have people who are strictly just tech people making apps that are not just for tech people, we end up with a lot of situations like 23andMe, like BetterHelp, like Character AI, where tech people did not account for the hundreds of thousands of people who are outside of their, little bubble of heaven. And I think that in their looking for their little bubble of heaven, they've created echo chambers for hundreds of other thousands of people to create their own, whether it's a slice of heaven or a slice of hell, that it could be for either people. Like you said, like what you get in is what you take out. It takes one to know one. And I think that's one thing that is really dangerous and insidious about just data collection in general. And I just wanted to go back to kind of circle back about what you talked about, like ethical data collection processes and ethical ways of looking at and creating these infrastructures. What does that look like to you, like creating these ethical procedures and products?
Yeah, so there's tons of frameworks out there that people can use, specifically again around compliance. But the bigger question is, how do you actually design with ethics in mind? It's not something that's like copy and paste. Like, there's no like formula or you know it doesn't just like, okay, we want to be secure, snap your fingers, it's secure. It's really about setting up internal frameworks to ask the right questions. Like, for example, we wanted to release a paid subscription feature on our digital website platform. And we had to go in and ask ourselves, like, okay, we have paid subscriptions. So not only do we have to make sure that we're like making sure that we're financially compliant, making sure that we're compliant with things like GDPR, and making sure that our data collection stuff is compliant. But like, what happens if somebody were to use our platform for human trafficking? Like, we had to like you said, like, be your own cynic and like ask ourselves the questions of like, what happens if everything goes wrong? Like, what is the everything goes wrong plan? Like, what does it look like if everything were to go wrong just because we wanted to release a feature? So I think it's really just about like having, what are the core values that you have? for me personally, like again, I really believe in the protection of people. I want to keep people safe. I want to keep their minds safe and positive, right? So we also integrated things like I think Azure AI has like a content filtering, so making sure that there's no hate speech in place. So throughout the entire platform. So I think it's really about, establishing your core values as an organization, as who are the people that we want to be, and then shaping the technology for to be that kind of manifestation and show up in the world. Like this is how we're showing up in the world. Like there's so many things that can be put in place, and it's really up to the designers to make sure that they're going in and thinking about the ways that things can go wrong, and making sure that they put those gates in place, put the protection in place. But really, it starts with making sure that you're asking the right questions.
Yeah, and I really want to kind of touch on a point that you mentioned of just like, of course, the point wants to run from my mind. I'm trying to bring it up, but just like understanding your company's morals and values, and I think that it brings up a really interesting point of understanding who is behind the face of an app. Like a lot of the times when we look at apps like TikTok, a lot of the reason why a lot of governments find it suspicious that the app is so huge is because the face behind the app can be a really big, contender on the global stage. We find certain apps suspicious or certain like websites suspicious. Why? Because of who's behind the app. And I think, when it comes to, especially when what you said of like, there's not one size fits all for a way to make things ethical, because every app has its own different circumstance of like, okay, what's the worst case scenario in which everything goes wrong and, the world is burning down and like what's happening, what's going on. Like every app has its own separate scenario that in where something goes wrong. But I think that if we look also behind the face of the app, like who is behind those apps, because I feel like a lot of times we kind of separate tech from the person who created it, like separating art from the artist. But I feel like personally I don't agree with this, because your morals and your values are what's gonna guide what you're thinking about in creating an app. And when your thinking is not, not is not completely aligned with who the app is designed to serve, it can cause a lot of problems. And I think when we're talking about like creating ethical ways and ethical frameworks for us to protect just people in general, whoever uses the app, I think it's so important to look who is behind the apps that you're spending the most time on. If you're spending the most time on TikTok, do you know who runs TikTok? Do you know what company created TikTok? Do you know why they created TikTok? And it's not, me like judging people, but it's just more of like really thinking deeply about who you're supporting. Who do you pour your money into? Who do you give resources to? Because at the end of the day, that's what we're, supporting. Where you put your time, where you put your money, that is who you're supporting. And if you think that you wouldn't necessarily get along with the person who created TikTok, maybe it's time to rethink. Like, should I really be on this app? I don't know. I think that's just my own personal point.
Absolutely. Like we think about it in so many other ways too, like with the products that we buy, the clothes that we wear, right? Like, oh, like is this sustainable, ethically sound, right? Is this organic? Like we think about those things. And I definitely think there's gonna come a time where we also think about that from, like you said, the apps that we're consuming, where we're spending our time every day. So yeah, I love that point.
Yeah. Just wanted to bring that up. But to move away from the less serious topics, because it's been pretty serious up to this point, thinking about like just, like ethics and being mindful and, and hopefully nobody cuts that clip, but anyway, being mindful about what's going on in like our digital landscape. What do you think what are some ways that, that inspire you to keep going, because even though this topic can be like very emotionally heavy, I know
Yeah.
this conversation can be emotionally heavy, just thinking about ethics, thinking about what could go wrong, like having to like come to face with, okay, like what could go wrong, like what are the ways that my app could hurt somebody. I think that those can be just really emotionally heavy. Not a lot of people can like really take that. So what are some ways that you inspire yourself to, just keep going and keep working with what you're working with?
Yeah, like you said, like it is heavy. Like honestly, like when you like even when I was thinking about like, like how like again, we don't have to dive into it more, but like thinking about all these things can really be um it can be an emotional burden for sure. And I think you need to kind of like make sure that you understand your why of why you're going out and doing these things. Why innovation? Why technology? For me, I think I like I see so many really great opportunities when it comes to innovation and technology. Like I was a part of this trade mission and there was a lot of femtech there, and to just see the different tools, the way that women's perspective and the female lens was being taken to hardware products as well as the protection of people's mental health. Like there was a AI tool that was being built to kind of screen out trolls on influencer social media. Like if you're say like a professional athlete, it would help to kind of screen out all of that noise, all of that hate speech that comes to people kind of ragging on you. And I think there's so many positive things that can come out of building technology and trying to find innovation. Like I remember a few years ago, like they were building autonomous cars, and it so happened that like the AI like camera bot couldn't detect somebody of color, right? And like how they've like really changed that and like dove into that. And I think there's so many ways that you can kind of take again that ethical piece, but just really push out positive, really impactful things into the world. I think that's what inspires me is again having once you set that intention and then making sure that you're putting those things in place really inspires me because I think hopefully more people can have conversations like this and be able to really again push out something really great. So for me, what keeps me inspired is just like knowing that like there is a place and a space for people to continue to drive these innovations. I think overall I'm super excited about like success and failure and just going out and trying. Like I think failure is such a great indicator of that, what's right for you. It's kind of like bumpers, like didn't hit that, move this way, hit that, move that way. So for me, I think what really inspires me is just the active effort of trying and again pushing out this idea of how can we create a better place.
Love that answer, because it's positive. It's thinking of that like, okay, half glass half full type of mindset of just like, okay, yes, there are emotional repercussions, emotional burden that comes with having this, but like looking at it from like, okay, but also there's this perspective that we can have, there's this perspective that we can take on protecting people and like having people have a just overall better quality of life. And I think it's just so important to have that type of perspective, because obviously you cannot be a cynic 100% of the time, or else you will be very, very sad and very, very lonely. But yeah, with that, Sarah, if there's anything else that you wanted to touch on today.
No, I want to kind of flip the script and eventually ask you some questions. So I think what we'll do is maybe a part 2 where we dive into this and go into like, who's Lynn? What's your journey? So that's the only plug that I'll do is that I think we'll be posting a part 2. So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. But with that, this has been Coding Colored Glasses. I'm your host, Lynn, with Sierra. And this is all. I'm Lynn. signing out.